From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk. The McLaughlin Group is brought to you by Siemens. Across the country, we're building answers, and we're building them to last. Siemens Answers.
Are you still sleeping?
I just wanted to check and make sure that we were on schedule.
The first technology of its kind
Mom and Dad, I have great news.
is now providing answers families need. Siemens Answers.
Issue 1, GOP Eastering.
We're a little bit too math-focused and not focused in people's hearts, so that we don't relate to, I think, average Americans more than we should. Stuffy old guys too much. And it really is painful to hear, because reality is we got a very young party.
After failing to win the White House 5 months ago, the Republican Party has begun a $10 million analysis of how to resurrect itself. The party especially wants to reach minority voters who voted by huge margins for President Obama last November. 93% of African Americans, 73% of Asian Americans, 71% of Hispanic Americans. The GOP is holding listening sessions across the country to figure out why minority voters were turned off by the party's 2012 message. It's also sending canvassers to areas Republicans rarely go. By order of Republican National Committee Chairman Reince Priebus, the party has issued a 100-page blunt assessment of its problems that details why, when it comes to the presidential level, the party leaves the impression that it, quote, does not care about people, unquote.
Question, is this public Republican soul-searching a bad idea? Is it overkill, Pat Buchanan?
Oh, there's nothing wrong with soul-searching, John, but they better look at reality. African Americans, Hispanics, and Asian Americans are now roughly 40% of the entire population and 30% of the electorate, and they vote 80% Democratic, and they are growing, whereas the white population, which votes 3-2 Republican, is diminishing. The problem is for the Republican Party, as more America looks more and more like the state of California, demographically, it will look like California politically, where we have not a single statewide office. Our congressional delegation is 2-1 outnumbered. The state legislature, both houses, is 2-1 outnumbered, and the Republicans are down to 31% of the vote. This is inexorable, and one of the problems is the Republican Party has never dealt with mass immigration, legal or illegal, and you got 40 million newcomers in this country in the last 40 years.
You think the Republicans need a 100-page study to figure out why they lost the election?
They could probably do it in a few paragraphs, but I commend Reince Priebus for doing this. I think it took a lot of courage on his part to admit to all of the negative stereotypes about the modern Republican Party. And they're going to go the way of the Whigs if they don't recognize the new American electorate. And he has some substantive reforms that make sense. Fewer debates. I mean, that was great entertainment watching the Republicans, but they made it very difficult for Mitt Romney to appeal to a broader electorate because of the positions he had to take to get through the primaries. An earlier convention might help. Now, hiring people to go out into the country, that borrows a little from Howard Dean's 50-state strategy, and that's a good thing. But hiring people who are comfortable in various districts in this country reminds me a little bit of the tobacco industry when they, back in the day, hired all these gorgeous young people to go out and promote tobacco. I mean, the problem that the Republican Party has is what they're selling is toxic.
Well, I don't see what's wrong with canvassing, finding out why. But I think it's pretty clear why, and that's because of Bill Clinton's speech at the convention, where he blamed the economic distress of the country right on the back, and he did it so beautifully.
Well, he drew one bright line with the Republican Party, but there are so many differences between the two parties where the Republicans are on the wrong side that even Bill Clinton couldn't part the seas to that point.
Do you think Obama has a winner with health care with this particular population. You follow me?
Well, of course.
And
because
Obama had it, but the Republicans had nothing comparable to it.
Well, and part of the issue too is that this Obamacare will cater to people who are lower income and who need it as a new entitlement. So absolutely, and it played a much bigger role in helping Republicans win, Democrats win than Republicans calculated. And part of what they argue, and I think it is a correct argument, is that Republicans want to get rid of Obamacare, but they've never come up with their own plan for what to replace it with. It's a good argument. It's one they continue to make right now.
In this polling that's begun, healthcare plays a big role in why he did as well as he did.
Oh, for sure. Healthcare is a huge cost that a lot of people and a lot of families are facing and don't see how they are going to be able to gain healthcare, so they're looking for somebody to help them out. This was a program that really worked for them. But I'll say something else about it. If you look at the minority population, both the Hispanic community and the Asian community generally and instinctively are conservative rather than liberal. In that sense, they're not beyond the reach of the Republican Party if they found some way to talk to these communities. And that's something which just didn't take place in the last election, to my surprise, actually, because Romney was very good at that
It took
when he was
place
a
under
governor.
George Bush, and it helped him win many more Hispanic voters than Mitt Romney did. He used the Hispanic outreach, and it definitely helped him pick up votes. And I think Republicans are looking back at that.
You got 40% of it. John, take a look at it geographically. Democrats have won 18 states in the District of Columbia in 6 straight presidential elections. Among those 18 are 4 of the mega states, California, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and New York, and they've won Ohio and Florida twice. The whole country is trending Democratic, and when these 9 or 11 million Hispanics or illegal immigrants are made American citizens, by 3 to 1, they're going to vote Democratic, and there goes Texas.
Okay, the GOP is old. Is youth the answer to the GOP need?
The GOP of old has grown stale and moss-covered.
The GOP, or Grand Old Party, is just that, old. So says Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, age 50. Paul gained international status when he filibustered for 13 hours the White House's legal rationale for drone killing.
And I asked this question.
Paul's filibuster took heat from Republican old guard members like John McCain, who referred to Paul as a quote-unquote wacko bird. In fact, Paul was a star at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, held 2 weeks ago. CPAC has become a testing ground for politicians who are eyeing a presidential run. This year was no different. And in this month's CPAC straw poll, there's an inkling of who will be running for president in 2016. Here's the results of the straw poll. Rand Paul, 25%. Marco Rubio, Florida Senator, 23%. Rick Santorum, former Pennsylvania Senator, 8%. Chris Christie, New Jersey Governor, 7%. Despite not being invited to CPAC. Paul Ryan, Wisconsin Representative and 2012 Vice Presidential Candidate, 6%. Scott Walker, Wisconsin Governor, 5%. Dr. Ben Carson, Baltimore, Maryland, Johns Hopkins neurosurgeon, 4%. Ted Cruz, Texas Senator, 4%. Bobby Jindal, Louisiana Governor, 3%. Sarah Palin, former Alaska Governor and 2008 Vice Presidential Candidate, 3%. Other, 14%. By the way, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, a speaker at CPAC, asked that his name not be placed on the ballot.
Question, how could the recommendations in the GOP report change the playing field for the GOP 2016 contenders looking ahead?
Well, one of the most important recommendations is the one aspect that the party really controls, which is the primary schedule. They're talking about changing the primary schedule in a way that really favors the more established candidates and would hurt up-and-comers, smaller candidates who need the primary system and debates.
I don't get it. Why does it change the schedule?
Because if there are fewer primaries, and if there are fewer debates, it favors those with more money up front. It doesn't give as much time or as many opportunities for breakout candidates like Rick Santorum was in the last election.
You mean more getting to know you time.
That's exactly right. And the smaller primaries, the smaller caucuses favor candidates like Santorum, and in the next election would more likely favor a candidate like Rand Paul. So they don't like this at all. Rand Paul, you just showed he is a real up-and-comer in the party, but he divides the party.
Did Rand Paul make a mistake by saying, yes, he thought he would run? Did he not say that at CPAC?
He's
either
hinted
publicly or
several
privately?
times.
Did he give it to the press?
Yes, he's hinted several times that he's considering running for
Considering,
president.
I've seen that, but this was almost a firm
Yeah, he's
yes.
running.
He's running,
and he.
Do you think they're starting too early? You've run for president how many times? 2, 3, 4? Three times.
Last
Okay, well,
time-
you know the
last
routine.
time very badly, John.
And
no,
you
here's the
also,
thing.
you also
Usually you start
spotted a
out.
party.
Usually you start out in March after the mid-year elections. But Rand Paul, one of the things he's saying is, look, that when I go to Iowa, I want to get my message out, and if I go to Iowa or I go to New Hampshire, it's going to get tremendous attention. That's why I'm doing it. He is starting very early, no question about it. But everybody knows Marco
Does he look
Rubio.
too hungry? Does he look too hungry?
He and Rubio are in the game.
Rand Paul.
Rubio is number 2. Rand Paul is number 1.
I would guess nationally Rubio is probably number
Well,
1.
the two of them
Are they starting too early? I meant that literally.
The media does it themselves. They go right after these guys.
I know
and
they
elevate
do.
them.
Why? Because they're bored by the president's
Because they
administration?
love this contest and they want to get it going again.
Well, yeah,
It's
free
like
media.
sped up,
Is
you
this
know?
something really new, though? 4 years ahead of an
You
election?
know why? It's all about the media. The news cycle is just an overdrive. It's on steroids. So everything is sooner, faster, shorter, and it's that's why we're seeing everybody talk about it now.
Well,
the day
Rand-
after the election, people were
Maud,
talking
have
about
you run for
2016.
president?
Have I? No, I'm waiting to be.
Are you getting the call?
I'm waiting to be appointed, John. It's
Has
gonna
it
be a
been
new
raised? It was
system.
raised with you, was it not?
Oh, yes, it was, primarily in my home, the president of the local housing authority. Look, what is happening, it seems to me, is that the Republicans have better fairly early get a comprehensive kind of policy that is going to have a broader appeal than they had in the last election. And that, I think, is in the works. And they're going to also have to find, in my judgment, some new candidates. And if they do that, they will have a better chance. Otherwise, because of the minority population and the growth of the minority population, they're going to have real problems in getting to be a national party.
Yeah.
That's
Has
why
every president been a Christian?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Isn't it time for a little development there?
There are some people who think so, John. I mean, if the Republicans continue to put forth candidates who are almost predictably losers, at some point something's going to break.
Well, there are a few closet atheists in there.
Yes, well, there I would disagree with you. Okay, if you're implying that somehow or the Republicans don't need the help of the Lord, then you're wrong.
Yeah,
What about the Jewish possibility?
Well, that's always possible. I mean, it has not happened. It's happened at the state level, but never at the national level.
Do you think it could happen? And do you think anti-Semitism, to the extent that it exists or has evaporated, which I think is the case, you think that would it be a plus? For example, the mayor of New York.
Right.
The mayor of New York would make a terrific president, despite the fact that he thinks so strongly about
He
Coca-Cola.
wouldn't even
or
carry
whatever
New
it is.
York City, John.
He'd never get through the Republican primary.
He ran against Obama. Obama would carry New York City against him.
Well, we don't know
tickets
that.
you
I don't
gonna
know
run?
about that.
I don't know that.
Oh, look,
I don't know
The
that.
mayor of New York spent $100 million and beat an unknown fellow from Harlem by 5 points. He's going to beat Obama. in
The
New
mayor
York.
of New York is doing
unknown.
a
He
terrific
was
job
unknown.
on gun
Right.
issues, and that's
He's doing a terrific job
on
as
gun
a mayor.
issues.
That's
He's
right. He
looked
has
at the
now
presidential
established-
See what he's
field.
narrowed the debt of New York too?
He's looked at the presidential
Yes.
field and
Oh, he's
backed
done a
off at
fabulous
least
job
twice.
with New York. I
Where's
mean,
he gonna
without
win?
He's an
question.
extraordinary man.
He's
He
completely
also
independent.
acquired a
very
personal fortune.
Absolutely.
He's got great ideas.
Right.
He's extremely smart, and he's fearless.
He's an
And
ultra-
he
If
knows
they
how
don't
to-
like my taking my position on excessive
right.
sugar
John,
or
he's an
excessive
ultra-liberal.
salt, so what? I'm
And-
still going to do it.
And he also knows how to bring good people into government. He put together a
But,
terrific
Exactly.
administration.
But
So he was
Mort-
an outstanding guy.
Morty's a nanny state liberal who would not carry a single
And
state.
All
I
right.
love him for it, but he's not going to be a
He's not gonna-
presidential candidate in the Republican
I don't-
primaries.
I don't
My
know that.
prediction.
I don't know why you're slurring the nanny state. I think there's a lot to be said for it. Issue 2, China cyber saboteur.
We know foreign countries and companies swipe our corporate secrets. Now our enemies are also seeking the ability to sabotage our power grid, our financial institutions, our air traffic control systems.
These capabilities put all sectors of our country at risk, from government and private networks to critical infrastructures.
In the State of the Union address in January, and the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper's Senate briefing this month, the Obama administration is going all out to alert the nation to the ongoing danger of cyber sabotage. Cyber sabotage is distinct from hacking. The purpose of cyber sabotage is primarily to destroy critical systems, not to steal. And cyber sabotage is more dangerous than terrorism. So says DNI Clapper. And that's not all. Attorney General Eric Holder and his DOJ staff has cataloged a list of cyber espionage thefts of corporate and trade secrets by China's People Liberation Army personnel working out of a complex in Shanghai. U.S. government agencies are aware. They know that they are targets of Chinese hacking, as are America's biggest corporations like Lockheed Martin and Google. This comes in the wake of revelations of Chinese government hacking at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, as well as other influential media.
Question: what would cyber sabotage by a foreign power look like? Susan Ferrecchio.
You know, it worries me very much, the idea that, you know, we'd lose power, you know, they'd sabotage our utilities, our internet would go down, the possibility of our, you know, national defense being threatened. This is a whole new frontier that no one has really put a lot of thought into, and it's something, you know, thank goodness the government's jumping in, but there's another side to this. There's another side to this. This is going to result in less privacy for Americans. This idea that in order to make sure the nation is secure on the internet, that they've got to, you know, there's going to be more monitoring. There's a report out this week about more monitoring of private sector email and internet activity. That's the other side of this coin that we need to really be worried about.
The banking system in South Korea was just shut down this week as a result of North Korea interference. So, I mean, we're seeing these things happen in real time.
A briefing 5 years ago on all of this. You can't imagine how vulnerable we are. All of our air traffic, for example, that whole system could break down. Our trains, you know, all of the clearance
electricity,
of
people suffering and dying from hypothermia,
and crashes and everything like that. Okay, a huge portion of this country, never mind all the power systems, is dependent upon a serious functioning
John,
of
look what we did with the Israelis to the Natanz nuclear plant that the Iranians got. You racked it all up, ruined the thing. They just targeted one thing with one simple straight attack. Now imagine that in all the power plants in the United States, telephone system, telegraph, all of these things, internet, dropping that whole thing down, even for a number of days, and you stop the American economy.
This is called asymmetrical warfare, but I want to move on. Okay, warfare without war declaration.
Cyber sabotage hacking alarms foreign policy experts. They fear that international rules of conduct forged over 2 centuries can be undermined by cyber technology. Here's a quote from Zbigniew Brzezinski, a preeminent foreign policy expert and former U.S. National Security Advisor. Quote, leaders can now use long-distance air drones for lethal strikes across national borders. Computer viruses can disrupt the military-industrial assets of rivals. A rogue but technologically sophisticated state can now gain the capacity to launch a non-lethal but paralyzing cyber attack on the socio-economic system and most important state institutions of a target country. The world community is witnessing an increasing reliance by states on covert acts of violence without declarations of war, unquote.
Mort, how important is that?
I think it's critical to our national security. People are not fully aware how much risk there is in all of these new systems that we've put in place. But as I say, you could break down any kind of safe air travel, train travel. A huge portion of our economy would come to a screeching halt.
Wall Street?
Yeah, Wall Street for sure. It's
Well,
not
John,
the only thing. All of our electric utilities, all of these things could be brought down in a matter of moments.
John,
and that is hugely dangerous
Heating
for
in
us.
homes?
Right,
Yes,
John,
for everything.
after World War I, remember, everybody used poison gas, but the way the Americans stopped it in the Second World War, they said, look, we got all this poison gas, Nazis or the Japanese, you start using this stuff and we will dump more of this on you than you can imagine. Frankly, I think you're going to get down to the point where you got deterrence that if you do this, all hell is going to break loose.
It's going to be a lot more difficult to figure out who's doing it to us.
They spotted South Korea.
Right.
Elena?
The concern within the administration is intense. And it reminds me of the way the Clinton administration was focused on Al-Qaeda in the 90s. You know, a small group of people knew what was out there and what was looming. And I think people are very aware of this in this administration. The Treasury Secretary, Jack Lew, was in China this week, and one of the discussions that he's having over there is, I mean, China is behind some of this, is to try to work
rogue
out.
Nation on this stuff.
Well, yeah, but they're
China's
a big
a rogue nation. They're doing
yeah,
this.
but they're also a big emerging economy, and they have a stake in not having this
But
turn into
they're
chaos either.
operating
So
by
there's
robber baron
There's
rules.
room for agreement there between the U.S. and China.
Jack Lew, Obama's Treasury Secretary, just completed a 2-day China trip in which he warned about the Chinese about cyber attacks. China's new premier listened but refused to acknowledge the Chinese government's role in rehearsing cyber sabotage.
This is where you got to retaliate against it. We go over there and plead with these guys. They're operating by robber baron rules. They manipulate their currency. They do all kinds of rogue state things in commerce. You got to hit them with some sanctions one of these days.
Right, and to reinforce what you said, given that Xi Jinping, the new president, has endorsed China's goal of military supremacy over the United States, it is clear, is it clear that China is on a war footing?
No, I don't believe they are on a war footing. They are on a commercial war footing. That's what they're all focused on, their domestic economy and growing their domestic economy. And by the way, it's working pretty well. And they now have an extraordinary technical capability in order
superior to ours.
At this point, in terms of hacking, in terms of controlling.
Not hacking, sabotage, cyber sabotage.
Yes, right. That I think they're superior to us. We're probably pretty good too. We don't know.
They're engaged in theft,
okay,
John.
they're engaged in this on an ongoing basis. I suspect practice makes perfect, or at least practice makes better.
Have you had any consultation with friends in your power league who are aware of the possibilities of cyber hacking, cyber sabotage, and are worried, very worried about this?
Of course, and it's not only, by the way, from China. There are a lot of people within the United States who are involved in this kind of stuff.
Where do you think there's superior talent today?
In terms of doing this, the Chinese are clearly the #1 in the world.
A smart person with a computer can be in any country.
Issue 3, old school blues.
Add America's aging schools to the list of U.S. infrastructure woes. The U.S. Green Building Council, or USGBC, is a nonprofit organization that advises government on how to build energy-efficient or quote-unquote green buildings. The council has issued a new report that provides a shocking price tag on rebuilding the nation's elementary and secondary schools just to bring them up to their original working order. The cost, $271, get this, $1 billion. That's for repairing the basics, like fixing leaky roofs and dripping pipes and insulating windows and walls to keep classrooms from freezing temperatures. But that's not all. Schools need modernizing as well as repairs. So the price tag is even higher. In fact, it doubled to $542, get this, $1 billion, over $500 billion, to upgrade heating and cooling systems and provide electrical outlets to classrooms to service computers. There has not been a national assessment of the country's school facilities since 1995, 17 years ago. Then the Government Accountability Office under President Bill Clinton issued an assessment. Despite that GAO report, nothing was done. Bill Clinton, in fact, wrote the foreword to this year's USGBC report. Quote, nearly 20 years later, in a country where public education is meant to serve as the, quote, great equalizer, unquote, for all of its children, we are still struggling to provide equal opportunity when it comes to the upkeep, maintenance, and modernization of our schools and classrooms. Unquote.
Question, is this report the latest attempt to funnel public money into green energy subsidies? Pat.
Yeah, John, look, I don't think that is the highest priority. There's no doubt that these public schools and their tremendous institutions in this country are breaking down to a great degree, and they need to be built up. But the idea that you got to make them all green is preposterous. I think that's a luxury you don't need, but you do need to build them up, and the main people that should do it, local and state.
Green isn't a luxury. It's the way of the world, and it's how we're going to adjust to a warming planet. And here in Washington, in the National Building Museum, there is an exhibit of what they call the Green Schools movement. It's across the country, and 40 schools are displayed. They're public and they're private. A dozen of them in the Washington area. People strive to get that LEED designation. You save money over the long run. This is a worthy cause, and
Here's the
the
problem
way
with
building developers and school systems, anybody who's writing any kind of proposal for tomorrow, it's the future.
You know, one of these schools costs $232 million. Another's priced at over $100 million.
I'm
for
sure
one
they
school.
don't all come in that expensive, and you can't have local communities fund all of the schools because you have such wide disparities because of living patterns.
Well,
Ross Perot made an issue of that in Texas.
Well, I'd be happy to
the problem is
give
that
you the loan of my fact finder card.
Okay. Well, we'll meet up in the parking lot afterwards, John.
All right, spread the word.
Okay.
The evidence right now does not support any connection between a green school and school performance. They've already done studies on it. There's absolutely no correlation at all. And on top of that, the cost of these schools is much higher from the outset, and they're actually using more electricity. The problem, Eleanor, is that we need money in schools. We desperately need money to get kids a better education.
What's the status of public faith in government, Pat?
Government is low and headed lower.
Eleanor.
Frustration that government can't respond when you have 91% of the public wanting background checks and the Congress can't deliver.
Completely tied to jobs in the economy. That goes up, their faith in government rises with it.
Yeah, but right now then I would say the faith in government is declining, and it's going to continue to decline for the next several years.
I think the Bible series on television is helping a little bit faith in government. Happy Easter. Bye-bye.
Why are you still sleeping?
I just wanted to check and make sure that we were on schedule.
The first technology of its kind
Mom and Dad, I have great news.
is now providing answers families need. Siemens. Answers.